Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this exciting episode of Visionary Talks by Governance Now. This is Kailashnath Adhikari, Managing Director, Governance Now, and it is my extreme proud privilege today to welcome none other than Shri Nalin Kohli ji, National Spokesperson, Bharatiya Janata Party and Advocate, Supreme Court. Thank you so much, Nalin ji, for joining us.
Thank you, Kailash.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, a well-known political personality. He is the National Spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, the party in government in India. The party in charge also for the state of Meghalaya in the northeast of India, and Director of Party's Public Policy Research Center. Nalin Kohli ji is the Additional Advocate General for the Government of Assam, representing them in matters in the Supreme Court of India. He was formerly also the Additional Advocate General for the state of Rajasthan. In addition to his practice in the Supreme Court, he also represents his private and government clients before different high courts, arbitration tribunals, the National Guild Tribunal, in the Adjudicating and Appellate Authority for matters pertaining to the Enforcement Directorate, the Central Administrative Tribunal, and the Armed Forces Tribunal, among others. He has been the nominee of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India, on the Disciplinary Committee of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, and has also been a member of the high-level committee set up by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs to suggest improvements in the disciplinary mechanism of the institutes pertaining to the chartered accountants, company secretaries, and cost accountants. He was also the first chairman of the board of directors of the Insolvency Professionals Agency, which was set up by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. So it's an honor to host you.
Thank you again, Kailash.
Welcome. So as we all know that the pandemic has gripped the entire world, and India now stands the second most affected nation with a surge in the daily count of cases. Congress went on record saying that the government has not done enough. What is your take on it?
It's a pandemic. And what it has to be seen in context, as Prime Minister Modi said, is what did the lockdown achieve in terms of slowing down that rate? Had we not done what we have done, we perhaps would have been in a worse situation. In India, every death matters, Kailash, but what's critical is that in this case, with regard to the managing of COVID-19 or Corona, is we have kept the mortality rate very low, an extremely high recovery rate, that is much better than some of the most developed countries in the world. So I think the Congress party, as always, is short on facts, high on rhetoric, and they don't get their act together because of that reason.
But sir, since you mentioned about the lockdown, now the same opposition has termed the nationwide lockdown as draconian, a step which jeopardized not only the entire economy, but put the fate of thousands of migrant laborers hanging. Do you feel that the lockdown could be more systematically announced?
Well, the whole idea of a lockdown was for it to do it suddenly. Can you ever, for example, ever decide to take a step which requires immediate implementation by saying we will immediately implement it after, say, 2 weeks or 4 weeks? Congress party, I don't take their criticism seriously because the Congress ruled states were the first to always announce the extension of the lockdown. They are the ones who used to say, whether it's in Maharashtra or Rajasthan, we want a lockdown, we are extending it even before the state center had arrived at a discussion. They are the ones who praised it in the meetings before the Honorable Prime Minister that yes, we need to continue with the lockdown. So how can you have two standards, one of criticizing, say, the BJP government, and on the other side doing the same thing and expecting that it will go unnoticed?
Then what about the migrant laborers issue? Shouldn't it be more systematically announced? Let's say you're saying that lockdown is something which has to be done immediately so that there's a cutoff between the spread of the virus.
Let me address that. Let me address it, Kailash. The question on the migrant labor is an important question. If Prime Minister Modi's government didn't care for the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, the weakest sections of society, the migrant labor, why would we have a scheme where we ensured, the government, that grain and ration and other pulses would go to the lowest denominator, irrespective of their ration card being of one state or the other, and continue right up to Chhat Puja? 5 kgs a month. And this was an important decision. Thousands of crores have been put in it. Secondly, how did the panic start? For example, in the state of Maharashtra, we must look at the whole story. In the state of Maharashtra, the panic started because it was a rumor that went. How was the central government involved in it? These are migrant laborers who had come, who are making the economy of the country. And of course, the country's economy is made by the economies of the state. So whenever we argue, and we've had debates on this, it's not as if your question comes to me as a surprise because we've had debates on it on national television repeatedly. There were issues related to the trains. That when the trains were launched, the states that were asking for the trains, which are opposition ruled states, They are the ones who didn't have any trains to ask for.
Hmm.
I mean, they are the ones who said we don't require any trains when they were saying, please, where are the trains? Where are the trains? Whereas the other states immediately did it. States like Bihar actually said, we will take our migrant labor back in
Hmm.
terms of more trains. But the sending states, which were supposed to do it, never asked for the trains. So there's much more to the story.
Hmm. So you feel that government has given its best shot?
The government always, or
Hmm.
Prime Minister Modi, will always put India first. There is no decision that is driven by any personal or family kind of a benefit or keeping that in the middle of the decision making process. Let's not forget that for in terms of it, he calls himself a Pradhan Sevak. He doesn't even treat himself as a prime minister.
Hmm.
And if you look at the schemes, if I look at it in what has been implemented between the last 6 years of Prime Minister Modi's government, that is why the people of India put in so much and showed their faith.
Hmm.
And in terms of the 2019 election,
Naturally. The government, now we talk about the economic aspect of the entire package that the government announced post the pandemic, the Atmanirbhar package. That was basically done to salvage a falling economy. Now, our dismal GDP numbers of the first quarters are a testimony to the fact that, along with the major economies, even Indian economy has suffered. Do you think that Atmanirbharta, this injection which has been given into the veins of the economy, will be able to feed the millions who have lost their livelihood and get one of the most resilient economy back on track?
in every challenge, there's always an opportunity. We've all grown up using phrases like in every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. So we need to
There's
look at
light
when
at the end of the tunnel. Yes.
absolutely, Kailash. So that's why when you look at Atmanirbhar Bharat, that's an opportunity. It's not an isolationist approach that we are locking ourselves up and only, looking at everything to be only for Indians for Indians. We are saying here's an opportunity for us to become self-reliant in terms of greater integration and ensuring India's share in the global economy increases in terms of exports, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of so much more.
Hmm.
If this was not attractive, how is it that the FDI figures that have come in this COVID time are
Hmm.
higher than last year?
Hmm.
How is it? Because India is still seen as a beacon of hope in terms of economic investments. Let's look at the entire package, the 20 lakh crores. Part of it is a fiscal package.
Hmm.
Part of it is for infrastructure development.
Hmm.
Part of it is gone for, say, helping the poorest of the poor in terms of, say, Kisan Samriddhi Yojana.
Hmm.
6,000 rupees goes into the bank accounts of the poor, of farmers to help them. 10 crore farmers have received 94,000 crores in their bank accounts.
Hmm.
If you remember, Kailash, a few years ago when the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana was launched,
Yes.
how much did the Congress and other opposition parties criticize the government? Zero balance. What is the point? But did they ever realize that financial inclusion is a must? The
Hmm.
banks were nationalized in the 1970s, saying that we need to give financial inclusion to all Indians. Was it done? Today, some 45, 46,000 bank accounts are open.
Hmm.
80% plus, or maybe 90%, don't have zero balance. They have money in them.
Hmm.
Billions of dollars or lakhs of crores.
Hmm.
These accounts are held by the poorest of the poor. They now don't have the fear of banking. They know what is banking. They go to a bank. They have that confidence. They have their money secure there. It's not left here or there. And more importantly, women are the greater number of those who have it. Look at the inclusion in terms of women.
The Mudra loans.
Yes. So therefore, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar platform and mobile was called JAM,
Hmm.
JAM.
Yes.
Through JAM, direct benefit transfer has been done. Several lakh crores have reached out of hundreds of schemes. If I
Hmm.
last remember, some probably till last year, that figure was almost 4 or 5 lakh crores delivered to the accounts of the beneficiaries. So ghost beneficiaries disappeared, fake beneficiaries disappeared, duplication disappeared, corruption got eliminated. That's public money.
Hmm.
So all of this is part of the improvement in the right direction. So coming back to your question, which is on the fiscal
Atmanirbhar.
terms of the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So as I mentioned, there's a fiscal part to it. There's an infrastructure part to it, helping the poorest of the poor. And then there's the opportunity in terms of greater liquidity for investor, for companies, MSME and others. Along with that, are special norms being created that only MSME companies can come and participate in these things. The repayment will be released in 45 days. Then something for the fisheries industry. So, I mean, it's been marked out as a holistic approach, keeping in mind that we have a target to become a $5 trillion economy.
So Atmanirbhar package, you mean, is aimed at not only, making the economy come out of the pandemic, but also achieving the first goal of achieving the $5 trillion economy.
Well, I can't call it the first or the second goal, but it's certainly an important step in that direction. And keeping in mind, and if you hear what the Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala ji has also said after the Prime Minister had announced that this is not a package driven. What needs to be done will be done. So in terms of it, it's a continuous process. This is a government that has its ear to the ground and will take whatever step is needed in the interest of the economy and the nation.
Since you mentioned, Nalinji, about ear to the ground, that the government has ear to the ground. Now, and as MSME was an integral package, segment of the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. But, these policies somewhere, because most of the MSMEs feel, and they have voiced out into the media, that these are rosy on paper. When they actually go to the bank at the ground level, they're not given the kind of assistance. Maybe there may be issues at the bank level. They are wary of giving credit about their recovery or whatever the entire atmosphere must be. So then, these things then true to be on the paper. But at the end, when the implementation comes, the governance aspect of it comes, somewhere it's not being meted out to the real beneficiaries.
Kailash, I would have not countered this. Let me put it in a different way. I can counter this in terms of the fact that regularly after the announcement of these schemes and packages, the union government has been putting out the figure of how much has been dispersed. The proof of the pudding is in eating it. So if a dispersal has taken place out of that money, it means somebody has taken that money. The dispersal can't be in the air. So therefore, dispersal is taking place. I see people tend to generalize. And there are different reasons. After all, ultimately, it's being done by the bank. But then obviously, there would be an eligibility factor. There would be other factors. So I can't get into that detail because that's not my area of work in terms of it. I'm not handling that responsibility. But I can tell you is that, and you should in governance now go out and print those figures so that even your readers and in other broadcasts, they get to do it. I don't have the figures handy with me at the moment. But yes, that kind of thing has been done regularly.
Sure.
And dispersal figures, I'm talking about the dispersal figures.
The dispersal figures, yes. I mean, government was at it giving out the dispersal figures, but then there are realities to it as well.
In fact, unfortunately, Kailash, what happens is these things don't make news. I mean, in the world that we live in, these don't make it to the headlines, but these are important inputs. That's why I'm requesting governance now to take it up.
Absolutely. Now, since you're speaking about headlines, these days news channels are making a lot of headlines regarding the entire rating controversy that is clouding over it. Do you now believe that the government should step in and maybe the entire rating framework should be something driven by the government or an autonomous body?
I haven't studied it. And as a lawyer, I'd like to always make a comment on something that's in terms of it, after studying the matter. In this, look, this has different angles, but I can tell you the principles. After all, the media is very important. It is called the fourth estate of democracy. Having a free, vibrant media is something we all are committed to. In this country, the media has been muzzled only once, which is an emergency. We all remember that days. Everybody does. And therefore, that's something that...
But your opposition, I'm sorry, I'm intruding you in between. But your opposition recently on the same platform that we are in said that right now also the media is in the same format as it was in the emergency. It is just lopsided towards one side.
Kailash, हिंदी में मैं बोलता हूँ.
हाँ, जरूर.
इसको हिंदी में बोलता हूँ. जितनी गाली मोदी जी और भाजपा और की सरकार को लोग देते हैं खुलेआम सरेआम मीडिया के माध्यम से, तो ये कैसी मसलमेंट है? Although I don't understand, as I said, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. Look at what we see in the social media. I mean, it's right to speech, free speech. I think, that's a charge that is made without any foundation. We have a robust media. Do you think the media will permit itself to be muzzled?
That is something always that the opposition believes, that the media is never favoring them.
They are issueless. They want to manufacture issues. They have a right as an opposition party, but unfortunately, they are manufacturing issues without foundation.
And that you believe that because it is without foundation, the media is not paying heed to.
Okay, you tell me. Have you ever received a call from anybody?
Hmm.
You are in the area of governance now.
Hmm.
You cover important issues,
Ab-
saying ki Kailash, you can't do this. I'm
Well,
asking,
that,
okay, which channel has a channel ever come out and said we can't do this?
hmm.
Okay, tell me reverse. Have there not been critical stories of the BJP and the government on every channel? I mean, so therefore, I'm saying
That's the
those who are
fundamental
most
duty
critical
of
of us
media.
also are functioning really.
That's the fundamental duty of
So,
media. If I am not, let's say, in
so
governance
therefore,
now,
that's what I'm saying. How is the media muzzled? How is the media muzzled if they can freely criticize and are criticizing?
you feel that the media is independent, and yes, the media's job is
I don't feel, I believe it. And I'm convinced it's independent.
absolutely. Now, since we were talking about the pandemic, Nalinji, the pandemic can also open a door of opportunities for India.
Ji.
Bangladesh's economy is supposedly doing much better than us. But at the same time, there are talks that due to our stringent bureaucratic procedures, hostile business environment, we might lose out to countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, who are more welcoming. Your suggestions in the same?
I was sharing with you earlier in the program that the FDI figures, if I remember correctly, for the period just preceding what we are speaking was about 35 billion, which is higher than last year. And on a year-to-year comparison, that's testimony that yes, investments are coming in and they see India as attractive. Every country has its own set of USPs, but Atmanirbhar Bharat and ease of doing business are programs by which the government of India of Prime Minister Modi is pushing to make India a more attractive destination. We have consistently improved on the scale of ease of doing business. Where were we in 14?
Hmm.
140 or something. We
Hmm.
were really low. Now we have come down to 70. We perhaps have come down even lower. I mean, improved. That's a massive improvement. So ease of doing business is part of it. We can't compare ourselves with, say, Bangladesh and others. For example, in terms of Bangladesh, which is an export oriented, there are benefits in terms of tariff that they get when
Hmm.
they export to various entities globally.
Hmm.
We are no longer in that. We've evolved from that stage, which we perhaps were 25 or 30 years ago.
Hmm.
So I feel these are incorrect comparisons. Many people tend to compare us with, say, Singapore. Singapore is an island state. The total population of Singapore would be equal to a city in India.
Hmm.
So you can't make those comparisons.
Probably an area of a city of India, just an
Possible.
area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And therefore, to answer it as a final thing, is don't forget investments and attractiveness of India also comes for the fact that we have a vibrant, huge market.
Yes.
And that's also an opportunity domestically.
Hmm. As I said, India is a very resilient economy. For Indian economy to be on its feet, we have a demand which is coming from the 1.3 billion that we are in. Be it textiles, be it FMCG, be it e-commerce, be it all sectors. Now, Nalinji, there is a lot of talk in the media also going on regarding the regulation of content over the digital media. You have codes, you have bodies which are regulating your broadcast media, your print media. But social media or dissemination of content, maybe it can be entertainment or news over social media, is some spot where the government is deliberating since a long time. Your views regarding government's intervention on regulating the content on social media?
Look, Kailash, I don't know what the government will decide
Hmm.
because there are issues of even jurisdiction in terms of how do you regulate it. But I know one thing that freedom of speech is
Hmm.
an extremely valuable fundamental right under Article 19
Hmm.
of the Constitution of India. But under the same Constitution, freedom of speech in Article 19, there are reasonable restrictions.
Hmm.
एंड मैं अक्सर इस बात को कहता हूं
Hmm.
हिंदी में कि अगर हम सभ्य बोलना भूल जाएंगे तो सभ्यता कैसे बचेगी इफ वी
Hmm.
एंड इन इंग्लिश if we forget to be civil, how can we have a civilization? So this is an individual thing that I always hope that people will remember. We can say अपनी बात शालीनता से भी रखी जा सकती है,
बिल्कुल.
मजबूती से रखी जा सकती है, गाली गलौज की आवश्यकता नहीं. And how can you threaten, say, a lady, whoever that is, you may disagree with her or threaten her daughters with the most obscene things in terms of rape threats and others.
Hmm.
That's not abusive language. I feel that is a reflection of oneself. मतलब ये दुनिया को आप बता रहे हैं कि आपकी कैसी सोच है. मतलब दिस इज नॉट रियली अ कमेंट ऑन द अदर पर्सन. जिस किसी को आप गाली जब सुनाते हैं तो पहले तो ये है कि आप इस गाली को दे रहे हैं तो आपकी कैसी सोच है ना. So, I mean, I always believe self-regulation is the best way. But yes, nothing can be beyond the constitutional framework. If there is the freedom of speech, there is also the fact of somebody's freedom not being curtailed by, fear or by other things, because after all, life and liberty comes under Article 21. If a person feels intimidated or feels stalked or feels worried because of threats that are coming because of the exercise of free speech of somebody else, then that also has to be viewed. So I think we are reaching a point where these issues are now getting discussed. Perhaps they will get debated, and over a period of time, somewhere or the other, some kind of framework may come. Now, it may be self regulated by the bodies that are the platforms, whether it would require the court to intervene, whether it would require laws to come in, I can't say, because that's a much larger debate.
Sure. Nalinji, with the onset of this pandemic, our health infrastructure in a way was exposed, you can say. Rural health infrastructure was not equipped at all, leaving most of the people high and dry. How do we ensure better health facilities to our people? And health is somewhere, a basic right. You can call it a fundamental right of an individual living in a nation.
Kailash, there was a very interesting time. Modi ji was addressing the party national executive, if I remember, a few years ago. And he was talking about Ayushman Bharat.
Yes.
Or maybe it was a public rally. I can't remember. It was one of these two. But as far as I recall, it perhaps was a party national executive. And in this, or meeting, and in this, he was pointing out that Ayushman Bharat, besides free treatment for the poorest of the poor, is also an opportunity for expansion of health facilities beyond the metros to the smaller metros to rural India. And he was in that context pointing out that we would first need doctors. So we, in our 5 years, which is the government of the BJP of Modi ji, had first increased the number of postgraduate seats, the number of MBBS seats, because doctors have to be available. The second is by putting all these surgeries, etc., and all that, and making it available in those places, at least hospitals or smaller clinics would invest into health, knowing that there is a stream of people whose payments will now come from the government. Now, in states like Assam, because you mentioned I'm also the additional advocate general of Assam, had an insurance scheme where people could be treated by this insurance scheme of the state up to 5 lakh rupees per family. Ayushman Bharat is also that kind of an insurance scheme. So it's a demand in terms of it that always existed in terms of health, but it's also ensuring the democratization or the widespread or the spreading out of health facilities beyond the places where people had to travel for long distances. So Ayushman Bharat is an important step in that direction.
So you believe that with Ayushman Bharat, with the proper implementation of Ayushman Bharat, we would achieve and we would strive to achieve good health infrastructure, especially in our rural areas.
It is leading to an expansion of infrastructure beyond the metros. There's no doubt about it. And we have to be, and at least that has to be recognized and acknowledged.
Because with the onset of this pandemic, what was most disturbing to see was tier 2 cities. We are not talking about the extreme rural areas. Cities like Patna, their infrastructure really got crippled. I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kailash. Imagine that this is a country where we didn't manufacture N95 masks.
Nor PPE suits.
Yes, and now we are. Now we are.
Now we are.
Yes.
At the
we
beginning,
didn't. I'm saying, look at the and Indians are doing it. Ventilators. We are now doing it in large numbers and at cheaper prices. PPE kits. So look, how much in terms of the pandemic, the government made the effort. I remember speaking once to a very senior officer, and he told me something very interesting. He said, Nalinji, the first thing we needed to do is fabric. So then we worked with the textile, in the textile sector, and we spoke to industries that how do we make the fabric? Then in manufacturing, that machine is needed, which does that cannot be a normal machine because it's called a sealing machine. It has to seal it. It's a PPE kit. Then other manufacturers said, we will go out and invest and order the machines. So that's all Atmanirbhar Bharat in action.
So all these initiatives undertaken were under the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which will definitely make India march towards its ultimate objectives. Now, if we talk about, Narenji, the three bills related to the farmers which were passed by the parliament and now with the president, as since they have become laws, hailing it as a transformational piece of legislation for the farmers, the government naturally termed it as pro-farmer. But yet there were protests in Punjab and Haryana, and one of your old allies has distanced themselves. What's your response to it?
I ask myself a simple question. How can choice be bad for somebody? If I had a choice, if I had to go to a shop and buy a shirt, and if tomorrow another shop comes that also offers me the option to buy a shirt, isn't that better in terms of me as a consumer to have choice? The
Right.
same is true for the farmer. How can choice be bad for him? Where is the APMC or the Agricultural Marketing Cooperative, Agricultural Produce Marketing Cooperatives being dismantled? They are there. Nothing has changed. Earlier also they had the choice of MSP. They have the choice of MSP now also. The government of India has increased the MSP. You must have noted that record MSP collection is taking place, purchase. All this farmers bill has done is done essentially two things. Under trade, which is in the concurrent list, said that if a farmer wishes to sell his or her produce outside the boundary of the state, they can do so if they get a better price. कोई उनको और पैसे देगा तो वो जरूर जाएंगे.
It's a free market. After all, it's a free market.
But at the same time, जो पहले APMC बना हुआ था, that is not gone. It is still there. So what has changed? It is only something additional. So my answer is that all the people who are opposing it for political reasons, and perhaps the governments also have, the states which are now opposing it, perhaps have limited choice because their so-called supremo leader comes out with a statement once in a while and then everyone has to follow a track. Today on social media, there is something leaking, and I don't know if it's correct or not, but an alleged letter of Kailashnath ji, perhaps it is true, saying that, to writing to Digvijay ji that, look, what's happening to our party. Now, if that is correct, then it just shows another. You have had 23 leaders in the Congress party who raised this question. So, I mean, for such an old party, for such senior leaders to feel that kind of thing, then that's a separate debate in politics altogether. But coming back to your question on these bills, so by adding choice, and who's done it? Modi ji, let's look at his government. Hasn't the Swaminathan Commission been adopted? 1.5% of input cost, we are guaranteeing it, doubling farmers' income by 2022. What about 94,000 crores going directly into the bank accounts of marginal farmers? 10 crore of them. It's going. Hasn't MSP increased? Okay, this country did not even produce hing in our food and in your food also, in your cuisine. How important
it's a very integral part.
Yes, it comes from Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Iran. 750 crores worth. We have not in 70 years produced hing. The first plant has been put up in Lahaul Spiti, in the high reaches of Ladakh, because it's a plant that does not require too much water. 5-year experimentation has already started that India should be self-reliant also in hing. I'm giving us one simple example. I mean, amazing, na? So those people who criticize us and tell us about our commitments, okay, has the MSP for pulses not gone up? Isn't pulses now being purchased at this? Are we not? So therefore, the government that has worked for the farmers, who did neem coating of fertilizers? The BJP government. Why? It used to be diverted to the away from agriculture to the drugs industry. But with neem coating, you couldn't divert it. Simple thing. It was introduced in the first tenure of Modi ji. That led to less black marketing of urea and other fertilizers. So this is a government that is scared. He talks about Gaon, Garib, Kisan, every for the youth, for the middle class, for every section there is something. So that's why I reject the charge in totality. And now, in terms of the other thing, an option of a contract. What does that contract say? Now, the risk is of the poor farmer. If nobody buys it, he's stuck. But if someone is saying, I'm going to pay you in advance for a contract to buy your entire produce, I want aloo or I want methi or I want whatever, or tomatoes or pyaz, onions, whatever. Isn't that better for the farmer? And when the APMC hasn't gone, he has the choice to go to the APMC. किसने हटाया? कुछ नहीं हटा. जो था वो है. उससे ज्यादा किया जा रहा है.
Empower किया जा रहा है.
Empower भी है, अवसर भी दिया जा रहा है कि आपके पास choice है. विकल्प है आपके पास, यहाँ भी जा सकते हैं, वहां भी जा सकते हैं.
तो कहीं ना कहीं जैसे एक
Some middlemen will suffer. That I do agree. Some middlemen will suffer, but this is a government that basically is always against middlemen. ना पहले तो
that's why the
सरकारें ही
DBT,
middlemen
that's why the
चलाते थे.
direct benefit transfer.
नहीं, पहले तो सरकारें ही बेनिफिट मिडलमैन चलाते थे. टेप्स देखिए ना, कितने टेप्स निकले, मीडिया नहीं निकाले.
नलिन जी, ऑपोजिशन ने रिसेंटली कहा था जो मॉनसून सेशन हुआ पार्लियामेंट का, एंड दे मेंशन इन द मीडिया दैट द प्रोसीजर्स दैट मेक आवर पार्लियामेंट, इट इज टाइम टू बिड देम फेयरवेल. इट वाज रादर अ जाइब एट द गवर्नमेंट दैट आवर डेमोक्रेसी हैज चेंज्ड ओवर द लास्ट 5-6 years.
वो कौन सा
इसके ऊपर
गाना
आप
है?
क्या प्रतिक्रिया?
आप तो एक परिवार से आते हैं. योर फैमिली इज आल्सो बीन इन फिल्म्स एंड टीवी एंड ऑल. आई एम ट्राइंग टू रिमेंबर क्या था ना, कि वो करे तो कुछ, नहीं तो हम करे तो कैरेक्टर ढीला है. आई थिंक
वो
सलमान
करे तो
खान.
रास लीला, हम करे तो
हाँ,
कैरेक्टर
thanks for reminding me. Your youngsters keep track of all these songs. So in that, वो exactly वही है. जब उनके समय पे कोई भी ऐसा रूल किया जाता था तो सब बढ़िया है. जब हमारे समय में किया जाता तो कहते हैं देश जो है खतरे में है, संविधान
देश का
खतरे में है,
लोकतंत्र खतरे में है.
तंत्र खतरे में है. तो मुझे कई बार ऐसे लगता है कि more than politics, some script writer is helping them to come up with dialogues, because dialogue तो आप किसी रूप में कह सकते हैं, उसका तथ्यों से लेना देना कुछ है ही नहीं.
चलिए, तो ये डायलॉग बाजी है जो आपको लगती है. Nalin ji, do you feel that the booking of the 4 individuals, including a journalist, under the UAPA was a way of shifting the attention from the pressing issue at hand in Uttar Pradesh?
I missed the first part of your question, Kailash. What are we referring to? You're talking of the people who were arrested recently?
Yes, the booking of the 4 individuals, including a journalist, post the Hathras case, under the UAPA was a way of, do you feel that it was a way of shifting the attention from the pressing issue at hand at that time in the state of Uttar Pradesh?
Let me ask you another. We have a very, very sensitive and disturbing image which has come out in the media of some boys going and offering namaz in a temple. Okay, it has happened in Makkah. Now, religion is a very, very sensitive and personal. We all respect each other's religions, everyone's religions, and we have to respect the traditions of it.
Absolutely.
Now, in the investigation, what the media is reporting, I have no direct knowledge, but I can only tell you what I'm seeing in the media. They are reporting that one of the people who did it was also involved in the anti-CA protest. So therefore, when these kind of things, factual things come up, the diversion is not the issue. The issue is the merit of the case. And if I recall, in this also case, it's not about who's a journalist or who's... People are good or people are bad. It has nothing to do with the profession.
Or maybe situations are good or situations are bad.
Yes.
People may not be bad.
There are good lawyers. There are lawyers who may not be ethically doing the right thing, but it's all there. The same would apply to doctors, engineers, politicians, in every field, the media. I don't think you should ever generalize, because generalization is very, very dangerous.
So you feel that naturally it was not a manner of shifting the attention from the incident that happened in Uttar Pradesh.
The Hathras incident is before the Supreme Court. And the state has also got to answer. Action has been taken against those who have not done the right thing. Of course, every rape is terrible. And if anyone is going to do anything wrong, an officer, how can you say that we are going to stand by that? But to say diversion of information, and let me say in this arrest, if the police does not have a sound investigation or credible evidence, they will have to answer for it, won't they? There is a judicial process which is separate.
Absolutely. The matter can always be sub judice, and till the time the police presents any sound evidence, then naturally, even the court is bound by providing evidence, and so is the police.
The court will only judge by evidence.
Evidence, absolutely.
The court will, and the police has to make a case on that.
True. Nalinji, we have a lot of viewers with us, and I can see on my panel there are some question and answers that they want to ask you.
Sure.
One question from a gentleman called Sagar, and his question is more or less pertaining to what we discussed, but still I ask, is do you think, and it's a very brevity is his point, that do you think that media is free these days?
You mean in terms of muzzling the media, what you had asked me?
It could be, I can only see his question that do you think his media is free these days? What I can decipher from this question is that do you feel that it is because, see, media as an organization, as you mentioned, and we at Governance Now also, we have done all kind of stories relating to governance. It could be critical of the government, it could be in support of the government because based upon facts. Now, do you feel that today's media is more, the biasness is much to be seen?
No, I think I would use the word bias. I think the change of what I have seen, because I've been associated with the media since 1989.
Yes.
It's over 30 years. In my 30 years, I can tell you that, yes, of course, there's a transformation of the media, and the advent of the social media has transformed even how the media is. But the principles of journalism remain the same. I think where we are now is that the media across platforms, is taking a stand on what they believe they would like to keep the focus. And therefore, they articulate everything around that stand. So if you compare it with the good old days, say 30 years ago, I don't know how young you were then, but 30 years ago, it was me.
Not born.
I didn't want to say that because I don't want to guess your age. Because nevertheless, I'd say, Kailash, that there was a time in the 80s and the 90s where it was merely announcement. Now you have also the editorial comment, part of the television show or the debate that we sit in, part and parcel of that. So then, as I say, that the editorial right is of the person who runs the channel, or the channel has its own editors to have a point of view. So a report is different to a TV show.
Absolutely.
It is a different genre. You can't compare, say, the debate with a program that says this is the top news of the day and only announces those news. That has its own space. The debate has its own space. I don't think we should mix the two because the debate is based on views.
News and views are separate.
But so that is pure news. That's why in a newspaper also, you have the news and then you have the pages in the middle, which normally are the articles or the editorials, which is the views part.
True. There's one more question which I can see from another gentleman. What is your thoughts on the politicization of such heinous crimes such as rape cases, like in the one in Hathras or Faridabad? The politicization of such cases.
These are beyond politics. These are human tragedies. And and politicization of it is not desirable. But it can't be avoided also because we do live in a political ecosystem. But yes, they are these are human tragedies that require justice.
And somewhere a fine line has to be drawn.
And that has to be ours.
True. Thank you so much, Nalinji.
Thank you for
joining us this evening on Visionary Talks by Governance Now. It was indeed a complete pleasure hosting you. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for also joining us and also sharing your questions for Nalinji. Nalinji, thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.